On a calm summer day, a warm breeze drifts through the air as the quiet sound of typing echoes in Kotaro's room. Finally finishing his work, Kotaro leans back in his chair, relieved. He picks up a book, hoping to relax, but before he can unwind, his phone rings. Reluctantly, he gets up to find it, grabbing a snack along the way. After searching, he finds his phone lying on the floor and answers the call. During the conversation, he shares that his recent unpacking went smoothly, but the caller's unexpected response leaves him a bit surprised. Shortly after, Kotaro heads toward Mount Takao to meet a couple. Upon arrival, the man hands him a ticket before turning to embrace his wife. Kotaro watches them, slightly irritated, and thinks they could have gone on this outing without him. The man, noticing Kotaro's disinterest, insists that they needed him as a guide, questioning if he doesn't care about them getting lost on the trail. Kotaro argues that it's nearly impossible to get lost, especially with a cable car available, but the man remains cautious about any potential mishaps. Without further debate, Kotaro joins them, silently following the couple. As they walk, the couple offers Kotaro food, but instead, he decides to buy himself a whole box of snacks. While they continue along the trail, Kotaro explains that track number 1 is well designed, with shops and restrooms along the way. He introduces them to the various attractions on the path, including the Monkey Park and the Good Luck Octopus, noting that even cars can use this track. The couple follows behind, snapping photos as Kotaro guides them. Once they pass the temple, he tells them the path leads directly to the summit. Kotaro mentions that this trail is more for sightseeing than serious hiking. At one point, the woman interrupts Kotaro, observing how much he seems to know about the mountain and asking if he researched it thoroughly. Kotaro humbly says he doesn't know much, but the man chimes in, explaining that Kotaro has spent most of his life in Hakioji, and local students often visit the mountain for school trips. The woman, now satisfied with this background, asks why Kotaro doesn't seem pleased to return, especially since he recently moved back. Kotaro admits that he doesn't have fond memories associated with this place. Just then, a strong wind sweeps over the trail, nearly knocking them off balance. While the man quickly checks on his wife, Kotaro stares off, murmuring that this is where a Tengu once kidnapped him. When they reach the temple, the couple, now curious, asks him for details about the incident. Kotaro explains that the experience is shrouded in mystery, and he has no real memory of it, only stories passed down from his family. The man wonders if Kotaro lost his memory from the trauma. Kotaro reflects that, while his mind holds no memory of it, his body feels a strange hesitation, almost as if it is trying to prevent him from returning to this place. As Kotaro sits alone on a bench, memories of a strange incident from elementary school begin to haunt him. He cannot recall ever being lost in the mountains, but he has a strong sense that someone intentionally erased those memories. Although the details are hazy, he feels an unsettling familiarity with this place, as if he has visited it before, and even remembers crying out of fear. Curious about his rescue, he considers that maybe it's for the best that he doesn't remember, as the experience must have been traumatic. Just then, the couple from earlier returns. While they discuss the Tengus and their similarities to yokai, blurry memories of a girl begin to surface in his mind. The man explains that the god of this place is also a Tengu, assuming Kotaro already knew. They discuss 2 statues, one of a man with a long nose, the other with a beak, and admire the beauty of the autumn leaves. Meanwhile, Kotaro recalls someone naming the trees and plants around him, and a realization strikes him: he has met someone here before. Without hesitation, he starts running forward, reaching the edge of a small cliff where he suddenly recognizes the path ahead. As he descends, a twig scrapes his cheek, triggering another flash of memory. He remembers standing at the same spot with someone else in the past. Stepping forward, he becomes tangled in a branch and nearly stumbles. Turning around, he finds himself face to face with a giant wolf and a girl wearing a Tengu mask. Shocked, Kotaro stands frozen as the girl warns him not to return, saying there cannot be a third time. Before he can process her words, he is suddenly sitting on the temple steps, and the man from earlier asks if he is all right. Kotaro dismisses his concern, his mind spinning with thoughts of the mysterious girl. Later that night, Kotaro cooks dinner at home, frequently glancing at the compass he holds. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, he decides to return to the mountain despite the darkness. The shadows serve as a stark reminder of how terrifying it must have been for him as a child. Unlike before, no one seems to be stopping him. Kotaro feels the weight of an important memory he cannot recall, sensing a need to meet someone here. As he walks forward, his foot slips, sending him tumbling into a ditch, and the fall unlocks yet another memory. He recalls crying over his injuries beside a giant dog when a young girl approached, asking if he had been crying for long. She gently examined his hand and skillfully treated his wound, calming him until he stopped crying. She knelt in front of him, suggesting they go find medicine, and for the first time, Kotaro saw her beautiful face. Back in the present, Kotaro awakens to see the girl from his childhood sitting before him, looking worried about his injuries. He stares in silence, noticing the small wings on her back. She waves a hand in front of his face, questioning if he hit his head. Without answering, Kotaro urgently asks if she was the one who rescued him back then. He begins recounting how he had gotten separated from his school group and fallen beside the giant dog. The girl seems surprised that he remembers her at all. He quickly holds her hand, describing every detail he recalls from that day. She looks startled and asks if he remembers their promise, but his blank expression reveals he does not. Frustrated, she scolds him for returning despite her warnings, her words echoing in his mind as he recalls that she had forbidden him from coming back a third time. Growing more agitated, she asks if he knows the village's rules. When he stares back at her, still confused, she blushes deeply. In a sudden, impulsive gesture, she embraces him, revealing that those who meet under the sacred tree 3 times are bound to be married. In a lively house, a celebratory party is underway, filled with guests wearing Tengu bird masks. They are enjoying the food and discussing Haim's upcoming marriage, seemingly oblivious to Kotaro, who sits among them with a solemn expression. Everyone around him is caught up in feasting and talking, leaving him unnoticed. A masked man pours drinks for Kotaro, who apologizes for being distracted. The man scolds him for saying sorry, reminding him that he is, in fact, the groom. This leaves Kotaro confused as he tries to understand how he ended up in this situation. Another man compliments his appearance, while someone else expresses surprise that Haim chose a human, even joking about the prospect of them having a tall son. Kotaro, still disoriented, struggles to remember what happened after he slipped from the cliff. Suddenly, Haim arrives, annoyed that a party was organized without her permission. When someone comments on her tardiness, Haim deflects by chastising another guest who suggests she should wear a Tengu mask to honor the occasion. She firmly declares that the mask is outdated, emphasizing her stance. Kotaro, observing the scene, realizes they are using the same decorations from Haim's birthday celebration. One masked guest explains that throwing a banquet is a tradition after marriage announcements, but Haim, still irritated, announces that the party is cancelled. The guests, visibly disappointed, protest that Haim brought Kotaro here impulsively and insist they were only trying to arrange everything quickly. Kotaro tries to speak up, but he is ignored. Haim clarifies that Kotaro only recently regained memories of their first meeting and is not ready for marriage yet. An elder intervenes, stating that Kotaro and Haim met 3 times under the sacred tree, which he interprets as a sign of destiny. He reveals that Haim expressed a desire to marry Kotaro, making her blush as she reluctantly admits the truth. With this revelation, the guests turn their attention to Kotaro, questioning him about his background and occupation. Haim attempts to intervene on his behalf, but her efforts are overlooked. Finally, Kotaro gathers the courage to respond, explaining that he is from Hakioji, works as a system engineer, and is single with no intentions of marrying. He thanks Haim for rescuing him and clarifies that he does not follow the village's customs, adding that he will apologize if he unknowingly broke any rules. Before he can finish, an elderly woman interrupts, insisting that he cannot simply disregard their traditions. Haim's grandmother, an elder, warns Kotaro about the consequences of disobeying village traditions. She turns to Haim, reminding her of the family's need for an heir and hinting at the serious repercussions of ignoring this duty. In a protective gesture, Haim steps in front of Kotaro, defending him and explaining that he is still piecing together his memories. Noticing her grandmother's confusion, Haim reassures her that she will help Kotaro remember everything. Respecting the village customs, she requests some private time with him to ensure he understands the situation fully. In a quiet moment away from the crowd, Kotaro confides in Haim about his unfamiliarity with the village's customs. Haim interrupts to hand back his mobile phone, proposing they escape through the sky while everyone else is busy drinking. She notes that they should first find his shoes. Kotaro, still confused, questions her eagerness to marry him, once again expressing his disinterest in marriage. He gently reminds her of his lack of real memories but recalls the time he used to call out her name as he chased her. Kotaro admits he remembers that, and Haim's smile deepens as she suggests that he must have a family worth protecting. She pauses, apologizing for involving him in this chaotic situation. As they look around, Haim spots his shoes but realizes he doesn't have his wallet. Kotaro checks his pockets only to find his compass missing. Haim guesses that someone might have picked it up, but before they can dwell on it, a group of children rushes by, loudly remarking on the presence of a human. Seeing Haim's wings flutter with excitement, Kotaro reaches out in amazement, surprised to feel the wings move under his fingers. Haim blushes at his attention, asking if he isn't afraid to touch a tengu's wing. Kotaro admits he feels some fear, but their moment is quickly interrupted by the sound of someone approaching. Haim hurriedly ushers him into a nearby room. While hiding, they overhear tengus gossiping about Haim's decision to reveal herself to a human, grumbling that she should prioritize her role as a leader rather than involve outsiders. When the corridor grows quiet, Haim murmurs that those tengus will face consequences for their disrespect. Kotaro is surprised to learn she is the village leader, having assumed her grandmother held that role. Haim explains that her family, all former leaders, have passed away, leaving her to be raised by the villagers whose traditional values she often finds irritating. Suddenly, Haim excitedly asks Kotaro for his opinion on whether shorter hakamas would look cuter. Without waiting for an answer, she shares her thoughts on outdated customs, complaining that wearing masks messes up her hair. Kotaro cautiously agrees that communication would be easier without masks, which delights Haim. She then shifts the conversation to the device she had returned to him, correctly identifying it as a smartphone. Proudly, she mentions her familiarity with technology like tablets and computers, explaining that climbers often drop such items, which she collects from nearby cliffs. As she describes people outside the village living freely, enjoying meals, taking photos, and spending time with loved ones, Kotaro recalls the criticism from the other tengus about her. Haim's enthusiasm fades as she laments how she cannot use these gadgets due to their passwords and the lack of electricity in the village. As village leader, she is expected to marry and bear an heir, but her longing to experience life beyond the village weighs heavily on her. She stands, apologizing for her rambling, and promises to retrieve his compass from someone who might have it. Kotaro tries to stop Haim, but she rushes off alone. Left in the quiet, he reflects on the voices he heard outside, speculating if Haim is truly planning to marry or if she might be considering an escape. He overhears people discussing the strict traditions surrounding her marriage, which include an expectation that she bear children for the village. In a peaceful clearing, Haim advises Kotaro to take deep breaths if he feels scared, assuring him he won't fall but suggesting he avoid looking down if he's afraid of heights. Kotaro asks why no one has followed them, and Haim explains that everyone is still celebrating. She presents him with a compass, though she doesn't hand it over immediately. Instead, she holds it tightly, revealing that it's a charm she crafted for his protection because he values it deeply. She wishes him good health and urges him to take care of himself before turning to leave. Kotaro hesitates, expressing concern that she might face punishment for breaking the village rules. Haim reassures him, explaining that she has never faced severe consequences before, though her grandmother often warns her about the risks of defying tradition. Smiling, she insists this is her own issue to handle, urging him not to worry. After thinking it over, Kotaro declares that he isn't concerned about the village rules and believes Haim has the right to make her own choices. He argues that she deserves the freedom to live her life as she wishes. Surprised, Haim considers what would happen if she refused to marry, possibly ending her family line. Kotaro assures her that it's okay for her to prioritize her own happiness and encourages her to escape and experience life. Gradually, Haim warms to the idea and begins to imagine herself wearing Western clothes, shopping in modern stores, exploring cities, and riding trains. She blushes at the thought, picturing herself in sneakers, trying new foods, and walking along the beach. With growing excitement, she takes Kotaro's hand, declaring that they should enjoy these experiences together. Kotaro, taken aback, protests, trying to clarify that he hadn't invited her to live with him. However, Haim ignores his objections and lifting him by the collar, insists they announce her decision to everyone. Flying back to the banquet hall, Haim declares to the crowd that she will live with Kotaro as his wife. The crowd cheers while Kotaro, still bewildered, attempts to grasp what's happening. Haim continues to chatter excitedly about their future together. Frustrated, Kotaro tries to explain that he only meant she should follow her heart, not the rules. Giggling, Haim insists that her engagement to him is, in fact, a way of following those rules, as they'll now be together. Their conversation is cut short by Haim's joyful shout as they arrive at Kotaro's home. She sets him down, thrilled to begin their new life together. Remembering her earlier words, Kotaro recalls a promise he may have made, but Haim coyly refuses to share any details, hinting that he should ask her again when he remembers. Hugging him tightly, she expresses her excitement about living happily together from that moment forward. Kotaro sleeps peacefully on his couch, surrounded by the quiet sounds of the morning, until his alarm disrupts the calm. As he gradually awakens, a notification on his phone reminds him to take out the trash. When he turns around, he's surprised to find Haim asleep at the table, her head resting on her arms. In her sleep, she mumbles about wanting more red rice, and Kotaro suddenly remembers he had completely forgotten she was there. Noticing that Haim is deeply asleep, he quietly approaches her, lightly touching the feathers of her wings. This gentle contact stirs faint memories from his childhood, but before he can reflect on them further, Haim wakes up, startled. She immediately notices him touching her wings, and Kotaro stumbles back, quickly apologizing. However, Haim seems unaffected by his awkwardness and suggests they start over. She bows politely, reminding him that she needs his guidance since this new life is unfamiliar to her. Haim then hands him a small box and expresses her desire to meet his family. Kotaro feels his frustration rise and snaps, reminding her that he never asked her to stay in his house. Haim remains calm, pointing out that it was Kotaro who suggested she leave her village. Kotaro clarifies that he only meant she could explore the outside world, not necessarily live with him. When Haim explains that she doesn't know anyone else, he asks if there are any Tengu communities she could join. She tells him that other Tengus live in the mountains, which, to her, would feel no different from life in the village. Although Kotaro acknowledges her reasoning, he still insists that she should reconsider her choice and return to her village. Ignoring Kotaro's protests, Haim starts unpacking her belongings. When he objects, she points out that the villagers already believe they are getting married, making it impossible for her to return. Reluctantly, Kotaro agrees to let her stay, but only for a few days. However, Haim is not content with this temporary arrangement. She chats casually, asking where to place her things, and then takes out a jar, calling for something to come out of it. To Kotaro's shock, a small fox suddenly emerges from the jar. As he stares in disbelief, Haim enthusiastically explains that she has many items stored inside the jar. She even offers him some sweets from the village. Still stunned, Kotaro asks how she managed to do this and wonders if she possesses the powers of a Tengu. Blushing slightly, Haim says he could call it magic but insists she's not especially talented since she's a Karasa Tengu. At that moment, Kotaro grabs her hand, marveling at her abilities and noticing a light seeming to radiate from her palm. He praises her powers, but Haim playfully pulls her hand away, teasing him about enjoying physical contact. Kotaro quickly apologizes, but she reassures him it was just a harmless gesture. Turning slightly away, she then asks if he finds her attractive, which only makes him more uncomfortable. He tries to brush it off, but Haim moves on, standing up to fetch cleaning supplies. Once again, Kotaro is surprised by her magic when she brings out various cleaning tools from the jar, proudly claiming she'd make a good wife. She even shows off a dusting cloth, which makes Kotaro uneasy, and he urges her to take a break. This frustrates Haim, who argues that a good wife can't be lazy. Kotaro, skeptical of her cleaning skills due to her background as a leader, suggests she may not know how to clean properly. Offended, Haim counters with memories of her childhood, where she often ran around with a mop, proving her capability. Kotaro decided to end the argument, handing Haim a vacuum cleaner and explaining its functions, encouraging her to give it a try. She was amazed by the idea that it ran on electricity, and when she pressed the button, she cheered with delight as it powered on. Kotaro couldn't help but smile a little at her excitement, and went off to tackle the laundry. Just as he was about to leave, he overheard Haim deciding to clean the back room. He quickly turned and told her not to go in there, but she had already opened the door. Inside, Haim's eyes widened at the sight of books stacked everywhere. When she asked if they were all his, Kotaro explained they belonged to his late grandfather. Entranced by the collection, she picked up a book about yokai, grinning as she noted that all the books seemed to be about the same topic. Playfully, she teased Kotaro about his interest in yokai, hinting that this might be why he was so fascinated by her own spirit form. Kotaro, a little flustered, reiterated that the books belonged to his grandfather. Unbothered, Haim continued to smile, expressing a wish that she could show her powers to Kotaro's grandfather, convinced he would be impressed. However, when she turned around, she realized Kotaro had already left. Peeking out the door, she called his name, but he merely replied he was heading off to do laundry, mentioning that the room was dusty, and she should remove her socks before entering. Haim, surprised, learned for the first time that Kotaro had only recently moved back to this house. Apologizing for her assumption that he had always lived here, she continued to look around, surprised and intrigued. Finally, Kotaro hesitated, then shared that he had grown up in an orphanage. Haim's expression fell as she absorbed this information, explaining that while she too had lost her family, she'd always been supported by her village. Kotaro, shrugging, replied that he had had no one to look after him, adding that, after all, a child couldn't live alone. He didn't think much of his response until he noticed Haim's somber gaze. She asked if he ever felt lonely, to which he replied that he never really thought of it that way, uncomfortable with the pity in her expression. He was just about to change the topic when Haim suddenly pointed out that her socks had gotten dirty. Standing up, she announced she'd take over the laundry instead. Kotaro tried to dissuade her, but Haim was insistent, declaring she could handle it. As he tried to argue further, she went on to insist she'd take charge of all the laundry and cleaning from then on. She even vowed to wake him each morning and prepare his meals. Kotaro looked at her in disbelief as she confidently took over the situation, ignoring his attempts to intervene and rushing off to grab his laundry. Relieved he hadn't yet handed over his underwear for her to wash, he carried his laundry basket toward the washroom, asking if Haim could operate the washing machine. As he opened the washroom door, Kotaro froze, startled to find Haim changing her clothes. Quickly, he shut the door, demanding to know what she was doing. Haim, unfazed, explained that she was simply changing out of her clothes from yesterday and wanted to wash her undergarments too. Embarrassed, Kotaro yelled for her to warn him next time, realizing belatedly he had barged in without knocking. Haim peeked out, now wearing her robe, and asked about the laundry. Kotaro firmly shut the door again, telling her not to come out in her traditional undergarments. Haim, confused, thought she was fully dressed. Meanwhile, Kotaro tried to make sense of her reactions, especially why she seemed so affected when he touched her wings. Later, as he sat alone in the living room, he reflected on their interactions, finally concluding that he needed to find a way to return Haim to the mountains. Kotaro and Haim were seated at the table, enjoying their meal together, when a loud rumble from Haim's stomach interrupted the calm. Annoyed, Kotaro noted that she was already on her fifth steamed bun and questioned why she was still hungry. Haim, undeterred, simply shrugged and pointed out that she couldn't help it. Kotaro sighed and checked the fridge, but it was practically empty, offering little to satisfy Haim's persistent hunger. Just then, Haim spotted a forgotten noodle packet on the counter and eagerly pointed it out, expressing her excitement to try it. Kotaro warned her that instant noodles rarely tasted as good as they looked on the packaging, but then asked if she had ever had ramen before. Excited, Haim explained that she had only seen it in the mountains but never had the chance to try it herself. Delighted at the opportunity, she asked if she could prepare the noodles. Kotaro agreed, deciding to make the instant noodles with her and advising her not to get her hopes up too high. As Kotaro boiled the water, Haim watched in awe, fascinated by each step. Noticing her enthusiasm, Kotaro invited her to help with the cooking. Eager but unsure, Haim chose the same flavor as him, and together, they approached the stove. Kotaro showed her how to open the lid halfway, and her excitement grew at the sight of the dried ingredients. He chuckled as she blushed in anticipation, then guided her to fill the cup with water up to the indicated line. When Haim struggled to spot the line, Kotaro pointed it out, and she carefully poured in the water, watching as the ingredients floated up. With a touch of nervousness, Haim worried about spilling, but Kotaro reassured her that everything was fine. She closed the lid as instructed, and they placed their cups in the microwave. Haim counted down the seconds eagerly, practically bouncing when the microwave dinged. Her noodles were finally ready. They sat back down, giving a quick thanks for the meal before Haim eagerly took her first bite. Her face lit up as she tasted the soft, wavy noodles and the tender pieces of meat, marveling at the unique flavor, different from anything she'd had before. Kotaro explained that these were Chinese-style noodles, adding to her excitement. Haim was amazed that such a delicious meal could be made just by adding hot water, and she focused on enjoying every bite. Kotaro watched her with a gentle smile, chuckling when she asked if she could have another cup if she was still hungry. Teasing her, he pointed out her love for food, and though she tried to deny it, she ended up finishing 3 more noodle cups. Satisfied, Haim clapped her hands together and thanked Kotaro, her happiness shining through. Kotaro couldn't help but reflect on how much she genuinely enjoyed eating. In a quiet moment, Haim shared how she never thought she'd be able to enjoy noodles like these after leaving her home in the mountains. She mentioned the taste of soba noodles she once had, expressing her gratitude to Kotaro for letting her experience these new foods. Kotaro, caught off guard by her heartfelt words, blushed, shrugging it off as just a cup of noodles. But Haim insisted that, without meeting Kotaro, she might never have had the chance to enjoy such simple pleasures. She was excited to tell everyone back home about this discovery, and couldn't wait to see their reactions. Kotaro, still a bit shy, offered to make other dishes for her sometime, which made her smile with delight. Without hesitation, she pulled out yet another noodle cup, and Kotaro realized he might just let her stay a little while longer. Once she was done, Haim carefully cleaned the cups and decided to keep them as part of her collection. She tidied up their space, eagerly laying out the futons side by side so they could sleep near each other. When she cheerfully called Kotaro over to see her preparations, he felt his heart race, panicking a bit at the thought. Bewildered, Kotaro looked on, feeling both flustered and amused by her unwavering enthusiasm. The next day, Kotaro prepares bacon and egg toast for Haim, letting her help with the small tasks. She's full of excitement as they layer the ingredients on the bread. Once they finish, Kotaro praises her for her effort, noting that she's doing well for a beginner. Haim stares at the toast, marveling at how delicious it looks, despite it having such an intimidating name. After checking that the coffee is ready, they sit down to eat. As expected, Haim can't help but exclaim over how good everything tastes. Kotaro eats silently, relieved he had enough bread at home to make the meal. While savoring her food, Haim expresses her surprise at having such a delicious breakfast, and shares how she's already looking forward to their next meal. Kotaro hesitates, and Haim, sensing his reluctance, anxiously asks if they'll have lunch. He reassures her, saying he'll cook anything she wants, which fills her with joy. He even mentions he might buy some meat later, and her excitement is infectious. Suddenly, Haim remembers she needs to hang the wet futons and clean the house. Kotaro suggests she start by setting up her own room and bringing her bag over, but Haim is not pleased with this. Nearly shouting, she reminds him that they already agreed to share the same room. Kotaro counters, pointing out their previous day's conversation and insisting she set up her own space. She brushes his protest off, casually asking which side he prefers, as she's not picky. Ignoring her, Kotaro begins packing up the futons, causing Haim to protest that she just prepared them. He firmly insists they won't be sleeping in the same room, claiming futons are uncomfortable. As he turns to leave, Haim grabs his shirt with surprising strength, determined that they should share a futon. Frustrated, Kotaro tosses the futons onto the ground, stating that this area will be her temporary room. Haim frowns at the distance, voicing her displeasure, while Kotaro struggles internally, torn between wanting her to return to her mountains and keeping these thoughts to himself.